Greetings. Hope this finds you well. So I came across a pretty interesting article by Jackie Lukman on the Hood Communist website titled Anti-Woke Crusaders Aren't Ignorant, They're Organized. And it was about a teacher, I believe, in South Carolina who had her AP English language students read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. Two of the students ended up complaining to the school board, and then kind of a fallout ensued. Then I believe that teacher wasn't able to have the students read that book anymore. And again, this isn't a isolated case, and as the title of the article by Jackie Lukman points out, these anti-woke people, they're not ignorant, they're organized. It seems like state after state, school board or school district after school district are banning the teachings about racism, the history of racism in this country, banning teaching about sex ed, teaching about just different levels and areas of oppression, whether it's around the enslavement of African people, the displacement of the indigenous, the attempted genocide of the indigenous, sexism, etc. That's all being erased from history, and very, very disturbing on a lot of levels. So let's check out this article real quick. The Jackie Lukman, also a member of the Black Power Media. Definitely check them out. Check out Hood Communists. They have a lot of good commentary and analysis on here. Mary Wood was reported to authorities by her students for having her class read that book, Between the World and Me by Coates. The Post reported that two of her students had reported her to the school board for teaching about race. I mean, think about that. Again, paraphrasing, but how messed up of a history does a country have to have with a particular issue, in this case race, to want to just sweep it under the rug, pretend it's not there, not talk about it at all, but just completely ignore it? That is how deeply, deeply problematic the history of the United States is on so many levels, particularly on race in particular, right? Yeah, and then she was ordered to stop teaching the lesson. They placed a formal letter of reprimand in her file and instructed her to keep teaching without discussing the issue with students. Jesus Christ. And again, she wasn't even, doing it in a political way or anything like that, which shouldn't be an issue when you're talking about something like race, right? You need to be on the right side of history with that when you're teaching, students about, Nazis and fascism. You need to be explaining that's a bad thing, not, well, there's both sides, two sides to the issue. No, you can't be doing that, right? Jesus Christ. She demanded students consider novel perspectives, setting the essay question, explain Coates' problem with America's tradition and retelling history, explain your support disagreement with this position. I mean, okay, what? Goddamn, these kids are fucking snowflakes, or just little racist assholes, or their parents are little racist assholes. Like, Jesus Christ, come on. So this was one of the students wrote to the school board member. I understand in AP language, we're learning to develop an argument and have evidence to support it. This topic's too heavy to discuss. I actually felt ashamed to be Caucasian. Oh my God, just fucking get over it, dude. That wasn't, goddamn. Honestly, I wish when I was going to school, I was taught this stuff. I didn't learn or have this kind of critical presented to me until much later on in my educational career, and it's something that every kid should be learning. At least probably starting in elementary, right? Um, I feel to an extent betrayed by Mrs. Woods. Built the idea, expand my mind to the introduction of controversial topics, subtly indoctrinating our class about how racism is bad. She's such a horrible teacher. I mean, God damn, Karen, come on, dude. So one student understood they're supposed to learn how to handle difficult issues intellectually, but talking about racism was too heavy for them, made them feel ashamed. You should be ashamed. You should be ashamed of the history of this country, and you don't know the history, can be doomed to repeat it, right? Um, and the other one felt betrayed and indoctrinated by having to learn how to examine what a black person says about racism intellectually. Instead of being the alleged smart and advanced thinkers, they're supposed to be in AP class and realizing, oh, I'm having a difficult time with this because it's something unfamiliar to me and maybe I need to deal with it. Why I'm so comfortable with it, right? Both of these students wrote directly to a member of the school board instead of presenting their discomfort with their teacher, which is the typical course of action. Acted like little goddamn Karens, right? Little white supremacist Karens. Um, this was a coordinated campaign by conservative, so-called Christian right-wing parents to use their children in their culture war against wokeness. It very well could have been, right? Can't tell me that this isn't what this is really is, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out months from now some right-wing political or even evangelical org was behind what these students did. This happened in South Carolina, where it's a violation for teachers to make students feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, any form of psychological distress because of their race. Oh man, welcome to America with, instead of C's, put some K's in there, right? The WAPO article states that South Carolina is one of 18 states to restrict education on race since 2021, so almost half the country. And at least half the country has passed laws that limit instruction on race, history, sex, or gender identity. I mean, look at that. Just erasing so much stuff because they're so ashamed for people, I guess, particularly white students, to learn about the history of this country on race, on just, the horrible history in general, or sexual identity. Jesus Christ. Tennessee teachers terminated for telling white students that white privilege is a fact. It is a fact. And again, white privilege doesn't mean that if you're a white person, you don't have any problems or struggles in your life. It just means your skin color, your pigment isn't one of them. Not that hard of a concept to understand, I wouldn't think. Wisconsin teacher was just dismissed after criticizing her district's decision to ban the song Rainbowland, which lauds inclusivity. Oh, man. But these people, I'm sorry, what these people in their anti-woke crusade haven't done and don't want to do is think about how Black people, Indigenous people, and every other group of non-European descended people feel about how our ancestors and we have been treated in this country, how we feel about the hypocrisies and contradictions in this country's history that we're told in classrooms, in churches, and from politicians in the media that we're supposed to just accept as something that, sure, it was bad and awful and bloody and unjust and inhumane and racist and sexist and genocidal back then, but it's all okay now. We're not supposed to have feelings or say anything about how nothing has been done to repair any of those deep and lasting damage to our people that we still suffer today. Whole lot of historical trauma and a whole lot of different groups of people, right? Particularly people of color, indigenous people, um, women, etc. Yeah, how are you supposed to celebrate the founders and then white supremacists were enslaved other human beings, right? Just a bunch of wealthy bastards, right? Not a single famous and important leader was a common farmer or worker. All were white, all were male. Maybe those facts of the so-called founding fathers influenced whether they really meant liberty and justice for all, right? Why they ain't our founding fathers. Um, we know that liberty and justice and freedom weren't extended to those enslaved people since the same government was allegedly formed on those principles passed the Fugitive Slave Act, which required that people who had escaped from slavery be captured and returned to slavery by regular old citizens. On September 18th, 1850, just 63 years after signing the constitutions, these white kids and their parents who coach them to claim that they feel ashamed or guilty to be white when faced with the actual history of this country and how it impacts us. Think about how we've felt having to listen to teachers and adults all over this country for decades upon decades tell us that our view of our relationship with this country is not one of freedom or liberty or justice based on its history. It's not only wrong, but un American. We're ungrateful and hateful for even pointing it out. Of course, they don't think about how we've felt being lied to and told to shut up about this country's history and the lasting legacy of ongoing racist terrorism, which is still happening. I mean, again, they never really outlawed slavery completely in this country. Slavery's still legal if you get arrested, if you go to prison, right? At that point, they don't want to think about it because they won't have to change anything they benefit from if they pretend like it's not a problem in the first place. So I think we need to stop believing that these people in this anti-woke crusade are ignorant. They're not. They're consciously organizing to maintain their power. They don't have to be intelligent to do that, but we need to recognize their craftily strategic and organizing efforts from governors' offices right down to the classrooms, enlisting their children as foot soldiers in the crusade. So what are we going to do in response? Ending with a good question there. And I think if you live in one of these states, in one of these school districts, make sure you're organizing against these little, anti-woke crusades, because it's really important that kids are taught to think for themselves, that kids are taught the actual history of this country, with just the history in general, the history of racism, displacement of the indigenous people, the all that stuff, the political persecutions, the all that stuff, right? Super important. The history of U.S. imperialism, how the founders were a bunch of they were enslavers, right? 40% of them were enslavers, like that article just pointed out. How we claim to be the land of the free, but we incarcerate more people than anywhere, than any country in the world, etc., etc. And obviously understandable why people with power and privilege don't want the full dirty, nasty history of this country getting exposed, but deeply important it is. So what are we going to do about it? Super important, and we got to find ways to fight back against that, no doubt. Peace, much love, all power to the people.